Aragillathavaellam was published in 2010 after a span of 7 years. In 2007, her Malayalam translations of Australian poet Leigh Murray were published in a bilingual edition. She has been translated into English, French, German, Swedish as well as various Indian languages, and her work has appeared in various journals and anthologies. Welcome to the session. Srimlet Dhar is a well-known scholar, poet and translator in Khasi language. She has published 5 poetry collections, a number of academic books, translations and research papers. She is also a recipient of several awards including Mother Teresa Samman 2003, Kasturba Gandhi Samman 2009, Meghalaya State Literary Award and many more. Welcome to the session. Shyam Sudhagar is a bilingual poet who writes in English and Malayalam. His poems have been translated into Tamil, Hindi, Bengali, Manipuri, French and Danish. He has 5 collections to his credit. Welcome to the panel discussion.
Hi, friends, writers. This panel theme is poetry. Poetic journey beginning at the end. It's a very interesting theme. So when I was asked to moderate the session, I was telling Rajivan I'm not a person of the spoken word, I'm a poet. But unfortunately, the moderator who was supposed to do this session was not here, so I decided. So he asked and I said yes, because I cannot deny he's a friend of mine. As a person, though I am not moderate, I hope you will moderate yourself. My training has been, my educational training has been in science. I was trying to think in terms of words, poetry, beginning, end. I think it signifies journey, meaning space and time, and of course movement, a movement in space and time, which is a very alert movement, because you have the beginning and the end in your mind. So it's a very alert movement in space and time. That's how I have tried to conceive, to understand this topic, so that we need to get started at some point. And this movement in space and time, the way I see it, relates to a larger system rather than our immediate realities and imaginations. But of course, we have to, when we try to talk about, you cannot start from the larger thing, you will have to start from the smaller things, you have to start from a word or an experience and the way you see your realities around. And I tried to think about it again, because I had to talk. And this is what, a few sentences which came to my mind, a take-off point. What I have felt, of course, you can continue this, what I'm going to say, and disagree or agree or take a different route. When you write, the tremors and terrors of the space and time you have traversed, and the pain and beauty of it. Because if you talk in literary terms, the pain which should vanish and the beauty which will eventually remain. That's how they say. It will definitely transform you, and when you reach your destination, temporarily or permanently, whatever it is, you have already transformed. You are no longer the same person who started. You began from where you began. And you have sort of shedding your skin behind, and you have shed your skin behind. The point is, what I'm trying to tell is the essential questions are: what is your space when you write? What is your space? And how do you perceive time? Your perception of time. How is it? And who you are, the individual, the writer, you who are. The content, the form, and the content of any work, any life also for that matter, is defined, is decided by this, and this is the trinity: the time, the space, and the person. This is the trinity of writing, is how I see it. And it's a personal trinity as well as a very political trinity. Now, we have to the convenience, the topic has this convenience and inconvenience, so let us start from the convenience of it. And let us not generalize. I thought we have to start from the personal and the political experience. That's what I thought. So before this session, yesterday evening, we were having a small gathering with some friends. And the focus of our discussion today, this theme is, not today, the festival as such is on the northeast states. Of course, I do not want to say northeast, as we say. I know it's not a single theme, just as India is not a single theme, but at the same time, let me use northeast. The point which came up was, this is a time when we are having two kinds of nations, because the nation state as an institution, the nation state, and the imagined nation, the emotional one, a nation of consolidated emotions. So when you write, how do these two nations reside in your work? What do they breathe? What do they eat? How do they interact with each other? That is one question which we were trying to talk among ourselves. And I tried to read your poetry also. I think this poetry which is included in this particular collection has nothing to do directly with it, but of course as a writer, you will have something to say.
Thank you. Firstly, I must say that poetic journey is, of course, central to any poet. A good poem has its own logic. The problem with poetry is that most people react to it by saying, I don't understand poetry. Or students would say, what does this line mean? What we should overarchingly realize is that every poem has its own logic. And it is the poetic process that comes out through a good poem. And that is, of course, related to the poet. The poetic experience is embedded in the poem. We need not always look out for meanings. Unfortunately, in school and college, when we teach poetry, we make a fetish out of meanings. What does this mean? I don't know what it means. The logic that is inherent in a poem, a good poem, is the creative process. And that creative process, I said earlier is related to the person. For me personally, the love for poetry grew out of this kind of a stage. When, as a child of 5 to 6 years, I would stand up and recite a poem. The narcissist in me once stood on the stage and started clapping after I recited the poem. But the love for poetry grew out of this kind of a stage. That was the beginning of the poetic journey. Reciting a poem, whether in English or in any other language. Understanding the resonance of a poem. Understanding the sounds of a poem. And finding an audience for myself. I never thought of writing poetry at that time. But reading aloud, reciting, finding an audience, groping my way to find an audience through the spoken word, that was the love of poetry for me. Later on in life, I found that there was a desire to write, a burning kind of a desire. But there was a hiatus between what was to be uttered became, ineffable. I could not write, but the words seemed there, stuck. So I resorted again to my childhood days. Started reading aloud poems written by other people, poems written by my friends, poems written by contemporary Indian poets, writing in English or in the vernacular languages. That space I created for myself over many years. Writing, publishing, and all that came by chance. I remember showing something that I had written to a senior person, and he told me when I was 23, please give up writing poetry. You don't have it in you. I believed him. At the same time, I did not believe him. But I continued with this exotic journey of searching for the written word.
Streamlet, would you like to add or continue with the same line, please?
Thank you, Anita. Talking about the poetic journey, it varies from one individual to another. As far as my poetic journey is concerned, I started writing poetry when I was in class 7, and I write simple poems for the school magazine. And my English teacher told me that time, you have a potential to write poems. But then, it grew up. It was poetry. But then I realized when I already became a teacher at the university level that I had to teach poetry. There is a component of poetry in our syllabi. And then I had to go into the depth of how to teach poetry. How do we understand poetry? And in that way, I tried to also understand the functions of poetry, the poetry that has been inspired to a poet. Then we have one very famous poet in our land. We called him the poet laureate of the Khasis, Susotham. In the preface of his book, it has written bit by bit about poetry, how you become to be a poet. He even confessed that he has never known what is art, what is foot, what is meter, what is rhythm. But then when you looked into his poetry, you'd find all those characteristics and devices of poetry, they are all there in his poems. And he even confessed that he first started writing poetry by translating W.E. Hickson's poetry, Drive the Nail Right. And he calls up all the students of class 10 that time to let's translate this poem together. And then he scratched his head thinking that how to find the correct word which is equivalent with the English meaning, drive the nail right. And then they found the very prominent line which is really very equivalent to English and very smooth running also in Khasi language. Sa bet ya u prek hep. And he said that was, the line that he could follow on. Every students of that class clapped a hand and they went on. And to me, I said, this writings of Susotham is an inspiration to all Khasi poets because he had written it in Khasi. And eventually, being a teacher of, Khasi literature, I found that how do I make students understand what are the methods of teaching poetry to them? Not only knowing the theme of the poem, but we need also to understand the in-depth meaning of what the poet wants to reflect about. So in this way, I thought if I don't myself write, how could I make others also to understand others' writings? So in this way, I was trying to flip the pages of my diary, and I revised those poems that I have jotted down since my school days. And I first published it till the eve of the millennium year, 2000. And it has become, a huge book. And it has got varied themes. But that very first publication of my poems, it also has the traditional form of poetry with regards to, if I write ode, there will be odic, rhyme schemes and so on and so forth. If I write a ballad, it goes the traditional way. But then after that, I feel that my journey is just the beginning, but it should not end. Even if we have in this theme, beginning at the end. And I believe that at the end, I have begun to write my poems. And those poems has been also appreciated by most of the Khasi readers. And in the other collections, subsequent collections, then, it's been recognized. But what I want to share with you all here is the love of your own tradition, the love of one's own land. It comes from the heart. Being the native speaker for one reason, and also being a teacher of that very literature, of that very language, I thought today's children, they may not know about the folklore of my Khasi language. So I brought up 2 collections of Khasi folk poems. which had, made a few research scholars at the MPhil and PhD level to do research on them. So eventually, this is the journey. But whatever we write on poetry, I think we should understand what we are writing about, what we want to voice to the people, to the society, and about our family, we're talking about hatred, we're talking about love, and so on and so forth. But there are also impersonal poems where we talk about something else.
So, while discussing your own creative process, you were talking about understanding beyond meaning, and of course you mentioned your language. So that brings to my mind, before coming to you, Shyam, all three of you have two languages in which you work. You write your poetry only in English, but she writes in Ghazi and English as well. Bilingual writer. Shyam writes in Malayalam and English. So it's a very interesting thing. So I have been thinking, I'm actually curious to know, because there is an opinion, there is a belief that poetry can only be written in one's mother tongue. I really believe it. It's a belief rather than a rational understanding. And in fact, I searched to find out writers who have written in language other than their mother tongue. Those poets who are in exile, Palestinian poets from other countries. But even Brodsky, I found that he wrote his poetry in Russian only. He wrote his prose and other works in English. That's how I understand. Anybody who knows an exception can correct me. So, but you write in your poetry in English as well as Ghazi, and you too. So maybe I can ask you, if you choose to begin with that, your conversation, how do you see this? How much of English is present in your, I have read your poetry in translation, which you yourself have translated into English. And yesterday when we were talking, I made this comment also, that when I read his English translations, it is like I'm reading Malayalam. There is no English in between. I connect with my mother tongue, because it's his English, which is a different English. So I would very much like to come back to you with this question, but let Shyam talk now.
Basically, Anita, I consider myself as a Malayalam writer because I started writing in Malayalam when I was in school, I should say. And later, and I don't want to use the word translation because I actually rewrite my poems. There is some difference between translation or transcreation or rewriting a poem into another language. Yeah. So, to begin with, whatever writer, basically, whether you are writing in your regional language or whether in which language you think, is an ancient question. In which language you think and in which language you write. So generally, I think in my mother tongue. And also, at the same time, can I think in English? Because recently, I think I started thinking in English as well. Because at times, when I talk to my mother or when I am at home, definitely, and when I'm in my dreams, definitely, I think in my regional language. And at the same time, when I'm away from home, then there is a kind of transmigration, I should say, or I started thinking in another language. Maybe I was away from home, in my late teens. But basically, what a writer needs is, as we are just coming from, myself and Streamlet, we are coming from another session by, what was his name? George Bishop, yeah. And he was talking about creative writing process, the process of writing, creative writing. And basically, I think what a writer needs is a strong backbone, a very strong backbone. backbone in two sense. One is a metaphorical sense and one is a real sense. Metaphorical sense, as all of us know, he should know how to say things, how should open up his heart without being afraid. And the other way around is how he sits down on a chair and a table for hours and write what he wants. Whether you are writing a novel or a short story or whatever it is, he is creating. He is in a creative process. And I have been writing for some 1.5 decades, just 1.5 decades. And I think earlier I had no idea about how this process of creation is happening, how it is happening. And recently I started thinking about it and why I write. These are the questions that I wanted to answer myself. Why I write and what am I doing with this writing, because I am not gaining any kind of money or anything out of it. I'm not getting any fame as if a cineast artist, I'm sure if he comes there, you all will turn back to him. So I'm sure that writers are not getting any kind of fame or any money out of it. Still, why this process of writing happens is the basic question. So, and why do we call writer a creator? Or what is he creating? I strongly believe that he is creating an alternative reality. Not a reality as it is, but an alternative reality. And we always have a discussion about the freedom of writer, what is his duty and what is his responsibility. In the earlier session as well, I was just coming from there and I heard the word responsibility. And I don't know, I don't understand. Nowadays, I don't want to understand the term freedom of a writer, because I strongly believe that writer doesn't have a freedom. The freedom of a writer is gone because he is responsible. He is responsible for what he is saying. Writer doesn't have a freedom because he's a writer and he puts away his freedom because he's a writer and he's responsible to write. And that is what he opts for, just like any other people. And usually we misinterpret the responsibility of a writer as just political. It's not, he is not just, actually it is true that he should be brave enough to write what he feels. And that is the responsibility of a writer. Not just being political or talking about some political happenings, or talking against the government or against the military, but he should be, he should be courageous enough to write about what he feels, what he actually feels with his heart. And also, of course, with his brain. He should be capable of writing his thoughts and experience. And yesterday in that movie, we have seen Archie Devama, and I have read his poems carefully. And I'm sure that his poems are connected with a deep sense of silence, a kind of experience that we understand, we feel from our surroundings. And this experience, and there is a kind of two stages in writing. One is the spontaneous process of writing, which come as a part of our mother tongue and also as an influence of some other language. It is a spontaneous process, like a dream, that we never anticipate a dream. I wanted yesterday night, and I was so tired, and I wanted to dream a flower or a beautiful girl. Do you think I can dream in that way? No, it just happens. It just happens. Our dream just happens. In the same way, writing, that spontaneous process, it is deep inside us. I don't know where it is, where that poem comes from, but definitely it comes in a spontaneous process. But it is not ending there. There is another session of writing called editing, which generally poets and writers prefer not to talk about editing. And I strongly believe that a good poetry, because you are going to give it to someone else. It is maybe if there are some poets who just write in a spontaneous way and which they think that it is okay enough to give it to others. Yes, if it is in a refined form, definitely you can give it to others. But definitely you should apply your brain and your heart in order to give it to others, because writer's duty is to give. Our experience, our thoughts, our feelings to someone else. In that way, I think writing in English, whether you are writing in English or in Malayalam, the basic experience of the writing, and that's why I think Anita said that my poems carries a sense of Malayalam, I mean, a sense of Kerala culture, or okay. Yeah, the Malayalam language, writing Malayalam in English, right? The language in the sense that I didn't get you. Language of culture, or
yeah, I meant it literally. I meant when I read your poems in English with translation. I'm not aware of the fact that I'm reading it in English. I feel I'm reading the poem in Malayalam. The flavor of the language is Malayalam, because the flavor of your experience could be Malayalam as well. And you were mentioning about this political, the responsibility of writing and politics of writing, or being political. I think you meant being loudly political, right? Because everything we do is political in a way or other. And it reminds me of a saying by a Palestinian poet, and it was very interesting. He said, people like loud poetry, or people allow their poets to be loud at times when their own voices are not heard loudly. All other times of peace, times of calmness, non-violence, poetry is not loud. It's obvious, because when we listen to poets from Sweden, or I'm not telling explicitly that these places are non-violent completely. They have their own violences, but relatively they are not. There are no immediate violences to the people's lives there. It's like chanting in silence. But Palestinian poetry, most of it at least, is not. Now, the question of bilingual writing, if we may come back, could you please, can a poet write in a language, write poetry in a language other than mother tongue? Or do you see English as your mother tongue itself?
Well, when we talk about the bilingualism of being a writer, I would say that any writer who is bends toward the vernacular language, who dreams in their own language, then definitely they will conceive the ideas also in their own language. But at the same time, when your poem is being translated by you, you really know exactly what you mean, what you want to convey through the chosen diction in the poem. But one thing we should remember when it comes to translation, number one, we have to have the dominant ability of both the languages. That means you have to know equally, you have to be equally good in English as well as in your vernacular language. And number two is that you have to know also the culture. The culture. Suppose now I translate from English into Khasi, being other original works. I should also think of the culture that is being practiced in the target language. Because until you know the culture of the target language, it will be very much difficult and not so easy to translate from one to the other. But if you are the same writer and the same translator, whether you write in English, translate into Khasi, or you write into Khasi, translate into English, it is not much difficult, because the conceived idea, it's already in you. But suppose now a piece of work which has been written in English and you want to convey it into your own language, then you have to ponder really what the original poet wants to convey. Is it a literal meaning? Is it a multiple? In this case, I believe that being a bilingual, writer, if I write poems which are, already in my own language, I have no problem at all. But then if I have to write a poem in English, I have also to think which words that will fit the content that I want to convey the message. These are very important. In fact, the translation techniques, number one, we have to also know, and even the theories. The theories of translation also is very important, because if you translate a prose work, somehow you'll manage. But if you translate a poetic work, it is very, very difficult, because a single word may convey different meanings, but it may also not convey the real meaning what the original poets want to. So I believe that we have to take into consideration all these, and bit by bit we have to do that, because in the past 1 or 2 decades, we always write poems in a traditional form. But then now, the trend has come that we write in a free verse. Free verse form will not be very much difficult to translate. But, the traditional form is very, very difficult, because you have to consider the foot, the meter, the rhyme scheme, and so on and so forth. And how you put the figures of speech. The figures of speech as devices you insert into your poems. So we have to take it very seriously. Even if you are...
Sorry, if I may interrupt, do the new poets, the newest ones, write in meter? In meter? In traditional meters, do they write?
Yeah. In fact, the contemporary writers in Khasi languages, Khasi language and other regional languages, I believe in Northeast, now they are bent toward the trend of writing in free verse. It's easy in one way, but it doesn't mean that it is prosaic. It is poetry. Something you will find, the melody even in the free verse. That's what I have to say.
It is an altogether different a theme by itself, if we did have time. Now, let me rephrase the question and move on to the next topic. Before we move on to the next topic, let me ask you, why don't you write in Khasi, which I assume is your mother tongue?
Firstly, there's a correction. My mother tongue is Bengali. I am of Bengali parentage, born and brought up in the Khasi Hills. And I have a rootedness for Shillong and the state, which I have tried to express in my poetry, but I'm not very sure whether people have deciphered that or not. I have a strong, cultural and social rootedness in the place where I have been born and brought up. Although I am of a different parentage. That is number one. You talked about creating time, space out of poetry. My time and space are the Khasi Hills, the landscape of Shillong, the fields that I roamed about in Shillong, the places that I went around, loafed around, the people that I encountered, some bittersweet memories of childhood, some bittersweet memories of adulthood, some social and political tensions that I encountered as a young man. Yet, out of all this has grown a love. And I relate that love. I might sound a little grandiose and idealistic, but I relate that love to my writing poetry. I believe it all emanated from that fount, from that source where I lived in. It's good you asked me that question, that why don't I write in my mother tongue? And I've clarified that my so-called mother tongue is Bengali. I did try and experiment writing in Bengali. I had 2 or 3 poems published. But I was not comfortable because I had limitations. My vocabulary was limited. My knowledge of the language was unfortunately not up to the mark. However, when I tried translating the poems I wrote in my smattering Bengali into English, I found that difficult. I could not do it. I told myself one day in one of my wicked moments that why not, pass these poems off as Bengali poems by translating them into English. I couldn't do it. I could not go through that translating process. I felt that my thought processes were totally divided. When I looked at what I wrote in Bengali, seemed very different. And when I was writing in English, I found it totally different. And in fact, there was a sharp wedge, a schism. And I could not reconcile that, those two things which had become opposites, almost self-contradictory. So I said, let me continue writing in English. I'm comfortable in that language. I don't believe in that mother tongue kind of a thing, that one is only comfortable in the mother tongue or one should write in the mother tongue. What about the spawning of Indian writers in English today? We have accepted them. Anyway, I don't want to go into the polemics of that. We know that. It's a truism. We have accepted them. We will continue to accept them. And when they win Booker Prizes and Poetry Awards, we will laud them. I feel basically it's a matter of expression. It's a matter of comfort. I'm comfortable in writing in English because I have had an English, so-called English education. And we grew up in that language, me, Dhruba Hazarika, Robin Nangom, all my very good friends here. Even Mitra Fukan, who's not here right now. So, that is one thing. The other thing, I think, is that if you want also to be bilingual, you can translate. Translation can help you to be a kind of a quasi-bilingual writer. Take the example of A.K. Ramanujan. Great translator, great poet in English. Poets. Next, talking about politics. Yes, politics and poetry, politics and literature are inseparable. But literature and poetry also caters to the heart's affections. It is responding to your immediate social situation, social or political situation, your ethos, feeling for people, being sensitive to your surroundings. When we teach poetry to children in the classroom, why don't we tell them that write a poem about your surroundings? See what is happening in your next door state. There are floods every year. People are suffering. See the violence around you. Poetry can come through those sensitivities, through the heart's affections. And that is important. And that is why, yes, poetry is a contiguous whole. Poetry has a beginning, a middle, but no end. As Streamlet said, that there will be no end. Even perhaps me and my fellow poets like Robin, when we write, when we stop writing, we can ruminate and look back at the past. So that is poetry's journey. That is the journey of poetry. That nostalgic experience, nostalgia, I think, is very central to poetry.
Yeah, Ananya, I'm so glad that you brought in Arun Kolakkar's name to this discussion, because we just love him and he was bilingual in the most beautiful way. But it's also true that he was not mainstream Indian English, not acknowledged as a mainstream Indian English writer for a very long time. Of course, he is now. But when he was writing, even it was difficult for him to publish. But what I want to ask you again is another question, because when we read the main poetry of so-called mainstream Indian English, say for example, good poets, let me name good poets like Arundhati Subramaniam, or old generation ones like Adil Jasawala or his generation. And then when I also read someone like Temsula Au, the language is different. They are not writing the same English at all. It is entirely different. And this I have noticed when I read English poems written in English from many of the northeastern writers coming from the northeastern states. I have felt that their English is more sort of direct, deceptively plain and simple, and sometimes questions are posed directly. I was reading your poem, questions were there, you posed questions. But it's a different English. Any one of you would like to comment on this? It's just an observation which I am telling. Two different languages you are writing, even when you are writing in English.
We had a discussion on Northeastern Indian poetry on the first day. One or two of the poets are sitting here. You know, way back in the 1980s, Makarand Paranjpe, talking about the Shillong poets, namely Robin, Desmond, said that they were romantic poets, in the best sense of the term, because there's a self-yearning in the poetry, a yearning for the past. There is nostalgia. You know, all this talk about violence is all right. I mean, obviously, violence will be a recurrent theme in literature of any kind. And it is there in the poetry of the Northeast Indian poets. Whether it be Temsulao, Mamang Dai, Robin Nangom, Desmond Karmaflang, Kinfam Nongkindri, Streamlet Dakar. But the important point that Makarand Paranjpe made, and which critics I think missed out, was that they were romantic poets. And how true that is. Look at the poetry. Look at the poetry of the Northeastern poets. Not only the ones writing in English. There is landscape all around. There is history. There is past. There is nostalgia. And I would call this actually the poetry of love. Not in any, racial or narrow sense, but in the sense of nostalgia. In the sense of really loving the streams, the waterfalls, the hills, the valleys, and even the people, of course. But yes, there is this kind of a hiatus. between what could be and what is. And that is the present. That could be violence of sorts, the politics of corruption, etc.
Shyam, when you were talking, I remember you were telling when a poet is writing, a writer is writing, is creating an alternate reality. Do I quote it correctly? Interestingly, I have been working on translating a fairy tale in the last few days, a few weeks, which is Pinocchio. Pinocchio is Carlo Collodi's legendary children's story. And Pinocchio is dealing with this, the way I say it, and most readings about Pinocchio is same. It talks about, the association between the living and the non-living, because it's the story of a puppet, and the puppet finally wants to become a boy, a real living boy, and he does. So this question of association between the living and the non-living, or reality and imagination. So can you talk a little more about it, starting from where you ended, please?
About the reality, it's very simple, because we are living in such a world and we know what's happening. So definitely I wanted to, I said alternative reality in a sense that it just takes us away from the existing so-called realities that we readers doesn't want. And also it creates an actually I would like to add to Ananya's point that I strongly believe that the psychic pain or the exercise that we generally we take to deliver or to conceive a demon and a monster is far more painful and frightening than the psychic exercise that we take to conceive an angel. I hope you understood my point. Because to create an angel is not so easy. And it's usually when we say, as he said, write about valley and write about beauty or something, it is actually very frightening to write. The writer is taking that pain to take this beauty, this sense of beauty, and what is the real essence of that spirit, that essence of that reality, and he is converting it to a very beautiful angel, and it is very frightening. That idea is frightening in a beautiful sense, and it is a big pain that writer takes, and definitely I think that is the responsibility of a writer than just clicking a photograph of the reality. But the writer comes, because otherwise just a photograph is enough. If you're just taking a photo of a reality, then that is enough. And about you were talking about two. I don't Kolaka, rightly you pointed it out, as he said, he has sharpened two edges of a pencil, and with one side he writes in English, and with the other side he writes in Marathi. Yeah, in his own mother tongue. In that way, that's a beautiful thing that a writer can, definitely. Because generally we have a notion that whether we think in our mother tongue, and again, that same question is being asked. So I think it is basically about our experience and our personal engagement. Because I know among you people, among the crowd, I met a couple of friends here who writes in English, not in Malayalam. They are in Kerala. They are right here in Kerala, and they write in English because they are comfortable. They are more comfortable in English, and that is possible, I guess. I'm sure that's possible. Maybe they are writing about the kitchen or about maybe the same Kerala images or Kerala experience, but they are writing in because I know friends who thinks that English is their mother tongue, especially from cities, Bangalore or Calcutta. They almost forgot their mother tongue, whether it is Tamil or Telugu, because they, even in the Northeast, I'm sure that you are familiar with such people, because it's quite natural, I guess. It comes naturally. For me, I started learning English when I was in my late teens, and then I started translating my poems to English, not just mine. I translated, I tried to translate so many writers of Malayalam into English, and that is how I learned my writing. Just like how we say Vincent van Gogh has drawn so many pictures to understand the craft. Yes, that is there. To understand the craft is there. And definitely I think translation helps you a lot, because I remember I read Baudelaire's biography, and he has written from some 1,000 poems or something, and he has translated some 15,000 poems. It's very less. So that means that Victor Hugo has translated so many. So that is how you engage with your craft while translating. And then you can translate your own works as well. Because, yeah.
Well, it's already 1 o'clock. Time is up. We could keep on talking like this, because lots of topics are there. Translation is there. The question of... That's what. I think we'll wind up. On stage now, we can continue talking anytime. So if anybody wants to...
Yeah, I'm Abdul Hamid from Calicut. It's good to discuss about the being political or politically conscious in our poetry. Let me quote 2 lines of Abu Bakr Ashawi, a Tunisian poet. If people decide to leave, one day the time will answer their call. These 2 lines were everywhere in the time of Arab Spring, on walls, on their placards, and they were reciting also. But the poet was dead in 1938. But these 2 lines were discussing in this recent Arab Spring also.
Can you repeat the lines, please?
If people decide to leave, the time will answer their call. This is Arabic poem translated to English. And we have Pablo Neruda, Vallejo, and Mahmoud Darwish, Palestinian poet, seen in worldwide. But in Indian matter, let me ask about that. What happened to Indian poetry? I mean, the direct pictures here on these political things. Are they in a trap of romanticism and of fantasy? Why they are not being political now, being politically conscious? This is my question. Thank you.
Anybody wants to? Yeah, anyone. It's open to the... Anyone can answer. Would you like to?
Okay. I don't think that they are in that trap. I don't want you to call it as a trap, because it is a part of their life. For Pablo Neruda or whoever it is a part of their life. And being political is definitely not a bad thing. Definitely, I'm sure. But it should come from within. That's what we were discussing about. It is an experience. Like, if the poet has experienced that politics, or he could at least, even though if he has not experienced it, he could make it as an experience to the reader. And there comes whether it doesn't matter what the theme is. Generally, as we in the classrooms we say this is the theme of the poem, or these are the images that we use. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all what theme you are writing, or whether it is but being political, definitely. That's what I was talking about, the responsibility of a poet. In the beginning itself, yes.
You see, finally, it is the universal content of all great literature that matters. Yevtushenko, the Russian poet, once said, "No man is uninteresting. And if a man lives in obscurity, making his friends in that obscurity, then obscurity is not uninteresting." All right?
And we know that there is nothing outside political. Because now we know after reading French feminism or whatever it is, we know personal is political.
Hello, all of you, good morning. As usual, I am a delegate of your today's national seminar. My question is very simple. Why do we call poet a creator? Again, what are the senses we call a poet a creator? Explain.
Who would like to answer? Why do we call a poet a creator, and on what basis? That's how I understood. On what basis is called a poet? What's poetic creation? Would anyone of you like to answer? Why do you call a poet a creator?
The question that you have asked, why do you call a poetry a creator? Is that the question?
Poet. Poet.
The poet a creator. I don't know exactly whether you take, within quotes, the meaning of a creator. Because when we talk of poetry, it is a poetic creation. And if you think that all the poetic creations created by a poet, he is a creator, then exactly he is a creator of that poem that he has created. But then if you take the other way around, that poetry should be a creator, or why the poet has to be a creator, I think it depends also on how a person who is not called himself a poet, others may call himself a poet, but then others see him as a creator. So I think that the word creator itself, if a poet is being, addressed as a creator, seeing from the works that he had already created and has the kind of universal addressed the anguish that he has, he could be, the kind of creator that you could imagine, the imaginative creator. But then also, if the creator that we are talking in a very strict term of the strict sense of the term, I believe that a poet should not be a creator. Any writer can be, any creative writer can be creators.
Abdul, your question brought to my mind a couple of questions back to you. Maybe I also do not know the answers, but I just will pose. Not to get an answer now, I'm just posing the questions. Of the question of being political, I think it has been misread, misinterpreted largely, especially in our country. I'm just asking myself, can someone, so how, to what extent you are bound by the responsibility of the immediate concerns of your people, your land. Or to tell an example, see, imagining that I am a poet living in, so I'll again bring the example of Palestine. I am living in the Israel under the occupation. My not uttering a word about the occupation, my writing purely romantic poetry, I'm writing on love, is it not a political activity? If I choose to do that, would you call such a poet political? What is being politically conscious? Because I've read of artists who have chosen not to utter a word about occupation and continue painting. And I'm just asking these questions to myself as well as to you. I'm not. Yeah, if you have an answer, you say. I did not pose it for a direct answer. I'm just thinking.
Some poet is Vijay Lakshmi wrote Oodam. Oodam, Vijay Lakshmi, the Malayalam poem. That is, ഉണർന്നെഴുന്നേൽക്കുന്ന ഓരോ ദിവസവും അത് വന്ന് നിങ്ങളോട് പറയും അടുത്ത് നിങ്ങളോട്. In the time of that Isra Jahan, that problem, we have some poems, but in our country there are many political insurgencies, political problems, chaos and conflicts, especially in Northeast. But sometimes it may be my ignorance to get some examples that
it's definitely not your ignorance. Actually, you have triggered more questions on the topic. That is why I said.
I mean that the direct pictures here of the political means against the government or against the AFSPA in Northeast states and the Kashmir issue. But I think Indian poets they are very well in the adjustment, the political adjustment and balancing. I'm not criticizing you people, but someone is like so. They are balancing and they are adjusting for the needs of their political concept. The bias is there.
What I think she means is that being self-consciously political in your poetry may, mar that poetic effect or that poem. Self-consciously.
Yes.
So, a person might not self-consciously write about politics, might write about other things, might write about love, but that does not mean that is a kind of an escapism.
Yeah, Sham said about that. It's a part of poetry. And Neruda wrote many love poems also. That's the thing. Thank you.
You can talk even about the nature around. You can talk about the hills. You can talk about the rivers. But the touch that you have for that, has the political consciousness in that poem. So when especially we people from the hills, and there were a lot of territorial kind of disputes that we are still, questioning who belongs to whom. But still, we don't directly write about that point, that part. We can write, the demarcation of the river. I love the river. It belongs to me. It becomes nature poetry in that sense. But then it has the impact of other aspects as well.
Yeah, and also I think it is not about whether the poetry is political or the other way around, but I think that thought behind it, the profound thought behind the poem is important.
Hi all, I'm Anisha and my question is to you both. So India is considered to be the biggest democratic country in the world, and northeastern parts is suffering a lot of problem which you have discussed. So I would like to know where do you stand and what is your writings contribute on them and about the politics and a lot of issues which is happening over there.
think we are going back to where we began.
I think this question has been answered. I mean, the discussion has taken care of all this. But would like to say something?
I don't really get the tips of your question regarding the. You mean to say regarding the writings, or you mean to ask regarding the people?
See, I'm asking, like, the northeastern parts they're facing a lot of problems, and there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of sensitive issues happening there with the armies and with the laws and the struggle with Irom Sharmila, and there is a lot of issues to be addressed.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, like, where do you stand? What is your poetrical contribution?
The position of the writings. Let me come to writings. I will not talk anything on the people of the Northeast, but as Dr. Guhat already said, 2 decades ago, other people now they have recognized the works of the poets, of the writers from the Northeast, because they don't really address only the issues that people of the mainland thought of. We don't talk only of insurgency, we don't talk only of territorial issues of ethnicity and so on and so forth. We also talk about other things. He had already said about the nostalgia in poetry. And this itself, it carries, a wide meaning when we talk in terms of poetry. And one more thing, I am very proud of being a person from that area, because when I see the works of our people from our area, they are well competent with any other writers from any part of our country, and also, at the globe level. So, I thought that these kind of perceptions that we have from other people from different parts of our country, should not be focused only of those difficulties or those things that, we have in Northeast. We are living like what you live. We are living peacefully. We come from northeastern states to your place, and we can invite you at any point of time. You will always be saved. People, when we invite for these kind of programs to our places, they used to say, no, we are scared of this, of that. But no, nothing to be scared of. It happens not only in Northeast, it happens all over the world. So this is, we have to go on. We have to live. This is the thing.
എൻ്റെ പേര് ബിജു നമ്പൂതിരി, കൊല്ലം. ഇവിടുത്തെ വിഷയം കാവ്യയാത്രകൾ ഒടുക്കത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തുടക്കം, നാശത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തുടക്കം. നാശത്തിൽ നിന്നും തുടക്കം ഒരു നശിപ്പിക്കപ്പെട്ട അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇല്ലാതായ ഒരു വസ്തുവിനെക്കുറിച്ച് അനുഭവത്തിൽ നിന്ന് എഴുതുന്നതും, സങ്കല്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഇല്ലാതാകുന്നതിനെ സങ്കല്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് എഴുതുന്നതും തമ്മിലുള്ള അതിലുള്ള സത്തയിലുള്ള ആ ഒരു പൊരുത്തപ്പെടലുകൾ എന്താണെന്ന് ഒന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ കൊള്ളാം.
എന്നെ സംബന്ധിച്ചാണെങ്കിൽ എനിക്ക് സങ്കല്പമാണ് എല്ലാം എന്ന് വിചാരിക്കുന്ന ഒരാളാണ് ഞാൻ. അപ്പോൾ അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ പൊരുത്തപ്പെടലിൻ്റെ പ്രശ്നം വരുന്നില്ല. എൻ്റെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം ഞാൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന വ്യക്തി മാത്രമല്ല, ഞാൻ എന്നോട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളും കൂടെ ചേർത്താണ് പറയുന്നത്. എൻ്റെ സങ്കല്പം തന്നെയാണ് എൻ്റെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം. അപ്പോൾ പൊരുത്തപ്പെടൽ അവിടെ വരുന്നില്ല. സോ ഹീസ് മേ ബി ഐ ക്യാൻ ആസ്ക് വൺ ഓഫ് ദം ടു ടോക്ക് അബൌട്ട് ഇറ്റ്. ഐ തിങ്ക് താങ്കൾ ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചത് തന്നെയല്ലേ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്? പിന്നെ നാശം എന്നാണെന്ന് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നില്ല. എൻഡ് ഈസ് എൻഡ്.
രണ്ട് രീതിയിലും എഴുതുമ്പോൾ, ഒരു നാശം കാണുമ്പോൾ, ഒരു യുദ്ധം കാണുമ്പോൾ അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് എഴുതുന്നതും സങ്കല്പത്തിലുള്ള യുദ്ധത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് നമ്മൾ എഴുതുമ്പോഴും ഇത് തങ്ങളിൽ വായനക്കാരനിൽ അതിലുള്ള സത്ത ഏത് രീതിയിൽ സമ്മതിക്കാനൊക്കും എന്നുള്ളതാണ്.
അതായത് നമുക്കൊരു പ്രൈമറി എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ഉള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച് എഴുതുന്നതും അതായിരിക്കണം ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചതെന്ന് ഞാൻ കരുതുന്നു. ഇത് ഒരു വലിയ വിഷയമാണ്. എന്ത് കാര്യവും നമ്മൾ എഴുതുമ്പോൾ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു അർത്ഥത്തിൽ ഞാൻ ജനിച്ചത് മുതലോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ ജനിക്കുന്നതിന് മുമ്പുള്ള എൻ്റെ സമൂഹത്തിൽ നിന്ന് എനിക്ക് പകർന്നു കിട്ടുന്ന എൻ്റെ ബോധത്തിൽ ഞാൻ അനുഭവിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതായ ഒരു കാര്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് മാത്രമേ എഴുതാൻ സാധിക്കുകയുള്ളൂ. മനുഷ്യൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും, അത് എഴുത്താണെങ്കിലും ശരി, ഏത് തരത്തിലുള്ള മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളും, ശാസ്ത്ര പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളാണെങ്കിലും ശരി. അടുത്ത സമയത്ത് ഇപ്പം സനലിൻ്റെ ഒരു ലേഖനം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു ഒരു ഭാഷാഭൂഷണിയിൽ. അത് പറയുന്നത്, നമ്മൾ ടെക്നോളജി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് മനുഷ്യ നിരപേക്ഷമല്ല എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. മനുഷ്യാനുഭവത്തിൻ്റെ അതിരുകൾക്കുള്ളിൽ ആണ് എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ സങ്കല്പം, നമ്മുടെ ഒരു 5 ഇന്ദ്രിയങ്ങളിൽ ഒന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ ക്രിയേറ്റീവ് പ്രോസസ്സിന് വ്യത്യാസം വരും, നമ്മൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾക്ക് വ്യത്യാസം വരും, നമ്മൾ കാണുന്ന ലോകത്തിന് വ്യത്യാസം വരും. ലോകം എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ മാത്രമാണ് സംഭവിക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു സങ്കല്പമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു അത് ഒരുപാട്, ഒരുപക്ഷെ എന്നെക്കാളൊക്കെ വലിയ തരത്തിൽ സംസാരിക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്ന ആളുകൾ ഇവിടെ ഇരിപ്പുണ്ട്. അത് വലിയൊരു വിഷയമാണല്ലോ. Actually, he was asking, the way I understood it, if I have understood correctly, is he was re-quoting the topic, creative journey from the end to the beginning. So the end, he is telling it could be the end is the end of everything, no? The distraction from darkness to light sort of thing he was telling. He says, when you write something from your imagination and when you write something based on your experience to reality, how does it differ? Would it differ? What I was telling was imagination, reality is imagination. That's what I said in the essence. World happens in your mind. So your experience need not be your primary experience. It can come from your people, your land. It can come from the collective conscious of the larger atmosphere.
The aesthetics of poetry is, I think, very, very intuitive. Writing poetry, at least for me, is a very instinctive kind of a thing. And we talk about, appealing to the senses in poetry, sensuousness in poetry. Basically, the poetic journey can never end, because even if the poet stops writing poetry, the poetic experience will continue to haunt him in some way or the other. That is the poetic experience. It is not only writing poetry, it is apprehending life intuitively, as Wordsworth did in a poem like Tintern Abbey or in his preludes. This might sound a little abstract, but this is what I feel poetry is all about. Writing poetry is very sensory, very intuitive and instinctive. It is not a diagrammatic kind of a thing. You can conceptualize writing fiction. You can think of the chapters. But in poetry, it's not going to be like that. So even if you stop writing poetry, or if there is a period of desiccation, a period of barrenness, the poetic experience will continue to haunt you. That's all I can say.
Given the fact that any poetic journey, for that matter, for anybody, given the fact that poets, when they carry out their journey, they also reflect on the collective identity of the society, because it's not just one person's journey. It's the journey of the entire culture that he or she has acquired through her life, through her readings, through her experiences, through her interactions, observation. So it becomes the journey of the collective self of a people. So now, given that fact, don't you think that when it comes to certain cultures which have been ravaged, which have been under attack over time, or at a given point in time, they are increasingly political in comparison with the other cultures which have not come under those kind of attacks?
Yes, societies that have been ravaged will respond collectively. The political part may not come out only in literature. It can come out in other forms of writing. It can come out through journalistic writing as well. Yes, it certainly will come out in poetry, in literature. It has come out in the Northeast. But the point that we were trying to make is that perhaps transcending all this, there is a kind of, history seeping through poetry in contemporary Northeast Indian poetry, history or nostalgia, love for the past, love in various forms. Perhaps they are obverse realities, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, it's very difficult to hear. Can you hear me? Yeah. When you ask that question, I would like to tell you an experience I had in translation. A Malayalam poem was getting translated into German, and its title was Power. It was my own poem, and I was sitting with a young German boy who was in his 20s. And I had my English translation with me, and it was titled Poor Thing. Then he said, no, I cannot translate it into German without triggering a sense of mockery. Because after the World War, it became almost impossible. All words became, too loaded. He couldn't write poor thing in the sense I wrote it. He was only in his 20s. He's a new generation poet. And then, so that is what the language has carried from a generation or two generations before. They were afraid of being romantic. They were afraid of being, I think many writers have written about this. They just wanted to be matter of fact when they told things. So this was carried from a generation before. It happens. Rather than being political, I would say if you were suppressed in your past, your land, your language, your culture will have their resistance muscle more strengthened from your collective memory. That's what it will. You cannot escape it.
ഇവിടെ പറഞ്ഞത് പ്രകൃതിയിലെ പ്രപഞ്ചത്തിലുള്ളത് ഏതും കാവ്യ വിഷയമാക്കാം, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഒരു സ്പെസിമെനായിട്ട് ഒരു സബ്ജക്റ്റ് കവിതയ്ക്കില്ല എന്ന് പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പിന്നെന്തിനാണ് ഒരു ദുഷ്പ്രവണത എന്ന പോലെ സ്ഥിരമായി ഈ ശലഭത്തെപ്പറ്റിയും മഴവില്ലിനെപ്പറ്റിയും ആകാശത്തെപ്പറ്റിയും പൂമ്പാറ്റകളെപ്പറ്റിയും തന്നെ സ്ഥിരമായി കുറേ പേർ കവിത എഴുതുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ കവിതാ വിഷയ ദാരിദ്ര്യം ഇല്ല എന്നാണ് ഇവിടെ സൂചിപ്പിച്ചത്. അങ്ങനെ കവിതാ വിഷയ ദാരിദ്ര്യം ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ പിന്നെന്തിന് സ്ഥിരമായി ഇങ്ങനെ കുറേ വിഷയങ്ങളെപ്പറ്റി തന്നെ എഴുതുന്നു? അപ്പം അതിന് കാലോചിതമായ ഒരു മാറ്റം വരുത്താൻ ആധുനിക തലമുറയിലെ പുതിയ തലമുറയിലെ കവികളും എഴുത്തുകാരും ഒന്ന് പുതിയ ഒരു പാത കെട്ടി തുറക്കുന്നത് നല്ലതല്ലേ? സ്ഥിരമായി ഞങ്ങൾ ഈ പൂമ്പാറ്റയെപ്പറ്റിയും ആകാശത്തെപ്പറ്റിയും മഴവില്ലിനെ പറ്റിയും പൂന്തോട്ടത്തെപ്പറ്റിയും ഒക്കെ തന്നെ കവിതകൾ വായിച്ച് മടുത്തു. തനി നാടൻ ഭാഷയിൽ മലയാള ഭാഷയെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ മടുത്തു. അതുകൊണ്ട് ആ വിഷയ ദാരിദ്ര്യമില്ല എന്നിവിടെ പറയുകയും ചെയ്തു. പ്രകൃതിയിലെ പ്രപഞ്ചത്തിലെ ഏത് വിഷയവും സൂര്യമണ്ഡലത്തിന് താഴെ അല്ലെ ചന്ദ്രമണ്ഡലത്തിന് താഴെയുള്ള സമസ്ത വിഷയങ്ങളും കാവ്യ വിഷയമാക്കാമെന്നും പറഞ്ഞു. പിന്നെന്തിനാണ് ഈ മഴവില്ലിനെ പറ്റിയും പൂമ്പാറ്റയും ശലഭങ്ങളും ഒക്കെ പറയുന്നത്? അത് ഒന്ന് സൂചിപ്പിക്കണം. ഒരു ന്യൂ ജനറേഷൻ പോയറ്റ്സിനോടെങ്കിലും ഒരു മെസ്സേജ് നൽകണമെന്ന് അഭ്യർത്ഥിക്കുന്നു.
ഞാനിത് പരിഭാഷപ്പെടുത്താം. അതിനു മുൻപ് നമുക്ക് ഈ ചോദ്യത്തോടു കൂടി എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു സമയം അതിക്രമിച്ചു. നമുക്കിത് സന്തോഷമായിട്ട് വൈൻഡപ്പ് ചെയ്യാം എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. ഐ വിൽ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് യു ഫോർ them. Shyam must have understood. So what he said is that we have been telling there is no scarcity of topics or themes to write. A poet could write on anything. Then why do some people write on, themes from the nature like rivers and butterflies and rainbows? Why do they keep on writing on this? And he seems to be of the opinion that new people should not write, should not keep on writing on themes like that. Am I right? The topics of conventional beauty of nature, like a butterfly or a flower or a rainbow. He thinks, why, if there are no dearth of topics, why should people keep on writing on that?
Let me respond to that question. In fact, when we write about objects of nature, it doesn't mean that we are writing only about nature. It could be we are writing about God, the beauty of God, as reflected through the object of nature. So it is not necessarily that we are talking about a flower, of a sunflower or a lily or a rose. It's about a girl or it's about nature itself. It may reflect even about your spiritual feeling of, God or something else. So I think it is no harm if we have those images in your poems.
In short, the subject matter of poetry may be one thing, but the aspects, the themes might be something else.
Unfortunately, neither the butterfly nor the rainbow does not know humans are writing about them. So let us, So shall we wind it? So let me thank Ananya, Streamlet and Shyam for the very lively interactions, and thank you all here for your patient listening to 4 poets with 3 mics. Thank you.